Hey everyone, this is the second of a three-part video series on surfaces, and we are going to talk about boards and panels. The first video was all about paper, and you can watch that here if you want, and then come back and watch this video if you wish. I felt boards and panels are the next step in surfaces. Boards share a lot of similarities with paper that we talked about in the previous video, and panels are kind of an alternative to canvas for many artists, which we'll talk about in the final part of this video series. So let's talk panels and boards. I am Mark, and this is We Talk Art. Much of what we talked about in the paper video is going to apply to boards and panels. The surface and the tooth are still vital to how your medium is going to work on these surfaces. How absorbent the surface is will be a factor for wet mediums. And we want to make sure that the product is acid-free or there's an adequate protection barrier between the substrate and your art. The big difference with these products and the papers we talked about in the last video and the canvases we're going to talk about in the next video is going to be about the stiffness, rigidity of these options. And this is the superpower of these surfaces. One of the major reasons you might move to these surfaces would be stiffness, rigidity, and ruggedness, and this could come in different forms. To start with, you may just need a stiffer surface for the way you make your art, such as being able to support it in an easel without taping it onto another panel, the amount of material that you want to put on it, or how rugged you need it to be. But when you use tools on your surfaces like pen, brush, pencil, or whatever, there's a feedback that you're going to get from that surface. That feedback will make a difference in your mark making and how it will look in your art, which correlates to your style. The rigidity you will get with the board and panel will change the amount of pressure you can apply with your tools, which will give you a greater range of options, and this will change the interaction between the tool and the surface, and it will result in more variations in your mark making abilities. Also, some artists like to get, a bit aggressive with their art. You might be a little heavy-handed and like to put a lot of pressure on your tools. You might want to take advantage of the impact of your tool on a rigid surface. You might like to scrape, scratch, or disrupt your surface with craft knives, palette knives, or other tools. This might even include non-artist tools like sandpaper, scrapers, carving tools, or even, yes, power tools. No joke, I once heard an artist that uses rotary sanders on their work. You might have even seen my interview with Susan Handauer, which I'll put up here. She would lay out a lot of medium and then scrape that down into it with a variety of tools. My wife Debbie took a class from an artist, Michael Shemchuk, where they did something similar. They built up layers of material and then excavated down into it. Debbie had a blast in this class, and it did influence her work. I will leave a link to Michael's website in the show notes. You can go see his artist and what classes he's offering. For any of these processes, you need a very rugged and rigid surface to work on, but even if you're not that aggressive with your art, some artists prefer that rigidity in the board and panels for things like layering a lot of color pencils or paint, or working with mixed media that requires a really stable surface, or using a heavy eraser, which is kind of another form of excavation. Even marker artists will get advantage from working on boards, as they will stand up to the alcohol and felt tips that can cause a lot of grief for more fragile surfaces. I thought I would start this talk by looking at boards, since this is going to be most like the paper we talked about in the previous video. In art surfaces, when we refer to boards, we are usually talking about paper-based or cotton rag-based boards. When we talk about panels, it is usually referring to wood boards, which we'll talk about later in this video. One of the types of paper we talked about in the last video is 300-pound watercolor paper, which is something that you might almost consider a board. And Arches even makes a 400-pound watercolor paper, which would even be more rigid. But both of these would probably not truly be board technically. Another paper that we talked about in the previous video was Bristol. This is a drawing paper that has more rigidity due to the manufacturing process. Manufacturers such as Strathmore make sheets of Bristol that they call Bristol Board and is sold in a number of plies from 1 ply, 2 ply, 4 ply, or even 8 ply. The 8 ply being almost 1/8 of an inch thick. The plies traditionally referred to the number of sheets of paper that were laminated together to form the board. With modern processes, this is more of a designation of thickness, as these boards are now made kind of in one go. So these here are 4 ply Bristol board. You can see they're pretty rigid. 8 ply would even be thicker, and as you get into the 2 and 1 ply, it would be more like a paper. But these are rigid. They'll stand on their own. They could be put in the easel, and they will stand up to a fair amount of working, erasing, and so forth. Now, Bristol is typically a dry medium paper, as with the Bristol board, yet a lot of them will stand up to light uses of water-based mediums, pen and ink, or various things like that. But you'll need to test your mediums on these to ensure that they indeed will make your mediums look good. So, there's 2 challenges here. One is putting the mediums on it and it's staying on it. The second is, does it look good on that? Absorbent material may absorb the pigment too deep into the paper fibers, and they may not look quite as good. So you always should test. Bristol board, like the paper, is available in a vellum surface, which has a light tooth, or a smooth surface, which is going to be very smooth and might be better for pen and ink applications and so forth. The next option that we're going to look at is going to be illustration board. This is usually a high quality paper or watercolor paper mounted onto a 4 or 8 ply board similar to Matboard. It offers a nice rigid surface to work on that will handle a great deal of abuse without warping. The surface you can get with these are like watercolor paper. So you can get a hot press, which is very smooth, or a cold press, which is textured. You also, if you can see this, you can get different white qualities. So this is white and this is more of a cream. And so this might be considered a natural white. This might be considered a bright white. So realize that there's a lot of different surfaces. These boards are crescent. The Bristol board, by the way, was Strathmore. But there's several companies that are making these. These boards should also stand up to a good amount of wet medium, so they should work really well with watercolor, gouache, acrylics, or markers, depending on which variety you get. This one was designated as a watercolor board. This one is just an illustration board. Again, because of the surface quality and so forth, you should be able to use a fair amount of variety of mediums on them. They're so rigid. This is, I have 1 4 ply and 1 8 ply. So this top one's the 4 ply and this one's the 8 ply. I can hardly even bend this. I think if I tried to, it would fold. So very thick boards, really rigid, great for putting a variety of mediums. Another handy thing with these thicker boards is, despite them being very much like paper, you can put them in a standard easel and they're rigid enough to hold their place and you'll be able to work on them. As I mentioned in the paper video, these thicker board-based surfaces also have a higher perceived value over thinner options, and you might want to consider these for commissions or gallery or museum presentations. And even though you can't roll these materials to ship them or store them, it may stand up to more handling or shipping if it's well packed. Illustration board is offered by manufacturers such as Strathmore, Canson, and Crescent. These were Crescent options. While we are on the subject of boards, some artists will make art on framing mat board. It would be recommended to purchase an acid-free mat or a rag mat board if you're going to do this, because you don't want the acids in paper-based mat boards to penetrate into your mediums. But you should still consider that material is not designed to make art on. As a result, you should, again, as I said earlier, test with your medium. It is also probably not size, as we talked about in the paper thing, that controls the absorption of water. So you might find that certain mediums will be sucked too deeply into this board and not look really good. You can put a ground on this traditional mat board or primer. One of the advantages of using framing mat board is that you may be able to buy scrap from your local frame shop for a very reasonable price. One warning is that a lot of mat board is cut at a 45-degree angle to create the bezel for a picture mat, leaving the scrap to have very sharp edges. You have not had a paper cut until you've had a mat board cut. I'm just warning you. If you are planning to put ground on the surface anyway, this might be a great option. All of these board options can be cut with a sturdy craft knife and a good straight edge and a bit of practice. Some art supply stores that have a framing shop may offer to cut these boards for you with a mat cutter, sometimes at a small fee. Okay, when you're going to cut some of these heavy boards, you'll need to use a pretty heavy duty craft knife like this Olaf. It has the kind of the screw tightener on it. These are the break off blades, so you can break them off whenever they get dull. You'll need a good straight edge. You could use a good ruler like this, but you want to make sure it has some kind of anti-skid on it, so it doesn't want to move around. I made some ticks. I'm going to put this down to 11 by 14. When you buy these boards, whether it's this Bristol board like this, which is a 4-ply, or the heavier illustration board, which is actually thicker for their plies, so I have a 4 and 8 ply I'll show you, you'll get them in sheets, and they're going to be whatever sheet size that your store sells. They could be have variations to that, and they may be willing to cut them down for you. They may have a wall mat cutter or something that allow them to cut them down pretty easily. But in this case, I didn't, so I have to cut it down myself. Again, a good straight edge and a knife is really all you need, and a little bit of practice. The trick here is to actually turn the blade ever so slightly into the straight edge. You don't want it so tight that, or so much deflected that it might catch on the sharp part, but enough deflected that it's going to want to push against the straight edge as I cut. So I'll see this, and I'll do a few of them. These craft knives are very sharp, so you want to definitely be cautious with them. You want to measure twice and cut once, as the adage goes. I like these straight edges. They have a nice handle. They allow you to put a lot of pressure onto this so that the paper or the straight edge doesn't move. I like to get my hands somewhere in the middle of it. If it's too high as you get down, it may want to flex to the bottom. If it's too low, it may want to flex to the top. So get your pressure. You'll need a good cutting mat also. Forgot to mention that. Don't cut into your table because you'll be cutting through this. It may take several strokes with some of the heavier boards, but for this 4-ply Bristol, it should just take one cut as long as your knife is sharp. You want to draw it as a single stroke, again with the blade ever so slightly facing the cutting edge, not so much that it's going to snag on the sharp part of the blade, and you get a cut. If you're cutting artwork this way, which is possible to do, you always want to put something to protect your artwork, like glassine, which is artist's wax paper, I call it. That's an acid-free protective paper. And you want to have your artwork on the inside of your cutting edge, not on the outside. So if you make a mistake and your blade wants to cut out, you're not cutting into your artwork. So artwork on the inside and protected with glassine, and your artwork, and this would be the scrap. In this case, I'm cutting two 11 by 14, so if I mess up, I mess up, but at least there's not artwork on them. But it is kind of an acquired skill. You can see it's really not too difficult. You can get a pretty nice straight cut, and that is how you're going to cut this mat board, or excuse me, this artist board or this Bristol board. Okay, so this is an illustration board. This is going to be a hot press illustration board, and it is 4-ply, which is much thicker than the 4-ply Bristol board that I just cut. This may take a couple strokes to get through it. The trick is to try to make your strokes very much the same each time, just adding a little bit more cut to it till you finally make it through. I wouldn't try to get through this all in one go. I think you're just going to end up breaking your knife, dulling it, or getting a cut that's not as straight as you want. So it does make sense to make a cut that is not quite as deep, but just make several of them. And then you'll make your way through that and get a still very good straight cut. We are now going to move from boards to panels. As I said earlier, panels are usually going to be more of a wood base rather than a paper base. They're going to be more rigid and offer more varieties. The first and probably the most affordable option for panels will be an MDF panel. Looks something like this. MDF stands for medium density fiberboard. These panels will usually have at least one very smooth side. This one has two, and can be obtained in a huge range of sizes, all the way up to into the feet. They are quite rigid and fairly rugged, although if you drop one on a corner, you will probably break the corner off. They do have some drawbacks. They are maybe heavier than some of the other options, especially the paper-based options we just talked about. And as I mentioned, they are rigid, but to the point that if they are pushed beyond their stress level, they will just break. And they are not acid-free, so you don't want to put your art directly on them. You will definitely have to prime these, gesso them, or put a ground on them. Although a very tenacious artist may be able to cut these with a craft knife, as I showed you earlier, but usually it requires a saw. Most art supply stores will have a range of sizes of these panels, and they can also be purchased at a hardware store in very large sizes, where they may or may not offer the option to cut them to size, although many stores will not guarantee a precise cut and they may charge you a fee for that. With all that said, MDF can make a great surface if you're willing to prime it with the right ground. Most grounds, like gesso or acrylic ground by Golden or Liquitex, will create a barrier between this non-acid free MDF and your medium and art. A little bit of sandpaper can be used to get a smooth and desirable surface. You can also mount paper on many of these panels that I'm going to be talking about, which brings us to a new product by Legion Paper. Legion is known for their popular Stonehenge drawing and watercolor papers, also their UPO synthetic papers, amongst the large range of other papers that they sell. They are now mounting many of these papers onto aluminum panels, like this, which is a really cool new option. I do not have a lot of experience with these yet. I have a few here, so I can't really comment on them, but they seem like a really cool option. This one has watercolor paper on it. This has their black watercolor paper, and you can even get their UPO paper in this format. They can be, you can put a hook on them and they can be hung just like this, or which can save you some money when you try to sell it, or they could be put into a frame by you or your final customer. They're also nice enough to round the corners of these so you can prevent injuries, because cornered aluminum can be very sharp. But all around, they're a very cool, rigid, nice, fairly light product, and I think they would do pretty good. Other panels that you can often find in an art supply store will include basswood panels. Basswood is a light colored wood that has a light grain pattern and can be usually sanded to be very smooth, which they usually do that for you. Basswood is most often sold in a cradle form factor. This wood structure is called a cradle, and it holds the basswood very flat and allows you to then work on it. These backings can be in various sizes, from a 1/2 inch all the way up to 2 inches. I don't have one that thick, but now this one's getting up there. So this is 1.5 inches. I guess both these are 1.5 inches, but you can get them usually in a 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and 2 inches to get very deep edges to them. And you can sometimes find basswood unmounted, as with these art alternative ones. These, so they'll be something like this, and they're still very rigid. It should be noted, and I notice even on these Ampersand ones, that this is actually a laminate. So they've laminated basswood on 2 sides of some kind of MDF or other plyboard kind of panel. This is actually a good thing. This is going to prevent these from warping even as you use them. So these could be used without putting them, cradling them like this. But if you were to get other types of plyboard from a hardware store, one disadvantage is you're going to have to buy a fairly expensive good plyboard, furniture grade plyboard, to get a smooth enough surface that you'd get duplicated here. And that wood can tend to want to warp, especially in small sizes like 16th or 8th inch, requiring that you may have to cradle it in order to get it to lay flat, or frame it with a fairly hefty frame to hold it to be flat. So these kind of panels do have their advantages over DIY options. Not to say you can't do it. It should be noted that like all woods, basswood is not acid free. So this must be primed in some way to protect your work from the acids within the wood that might cause your paints to discolor or delaminate or various other things. Priming or gessoing these is important also, because some mediums like oil, if you were to paint oil directly on this, the wood would probably soak the oil out of the paint, leaving the paint on the surface and very fragile. It would probably cause your paint not to last very long. So priming these in different ways is very important. Basswood does offer a few creative options. It can be stained to create color. You can use clear gesso on this, either unstained or stained, so the wood will show through. You can scratch, scrape, or cut into this wood, as it is usually fairly thick. This is easily an 1/8 or 1/4 inch thick. And as I stated earlier, it will stand up to a great amount of work or excavation or abuse, whatever you're going to do to it. It is also a popular wood burning surface. Probably the biggest maker of these kind of panels in the United States is going to be Ampersand. Ampersand has a absolutely huge array of options for panels, including cradled and uncradled options. I have a range of them here, from smooth surface boards to aqua boards that you can watercolor on, to gessoed boards that you can paint with acrylic or oils onto, and encaustic boards. My wife does encaustic painting, which is a wax-based painting, can be done on this. And they have a huge range of other options that are cradled and uncradled. And they're now offering framing options that you can drop these right into frames very easily to have a very marketable product. You will have to go to their website to see all these options, which I will put a link in the show notes below. With all of that said, there are some other manufacturers that are making panels, including American Easel, Art Alternatives that I just showed you. Jack Richardson makes panels, and there's also other makers of panels out there too. So you can find these from different manufacturers. It's just Ampersand probably has the most variety. And if you watch the big trade show video that I did just a little while ago, I'll put up here. Jump forward to Ampersand. They're now upping their game. They're actually coating these panels completely within a product that will completely seal away any chance that acids are going to contaminate your artwork, which could be kind of a good thing. So check out their new products as they're coming out. Oh, and here's another one that I missed in that whole mix that I have, and that's scratch board. So this is clay board with black Indian ink on it, and you can scratch into it to get some really effective kind of, actually quite amazing artwork is done on this, and I desire to try to do that. It kind of seems the reverse of my pen and ink artwork that I like to do a lot. I have yet to do a whole lot with it, but it looks like a ton of fun, and I have these taunting me to do that. As I said earlier, you can go to the hardware store for plyboard and cut that down and use them for a variety of these applications. Again, you want to use something really good quality, probably furniture grade plyboard. You're going to have to deal with warpage. Usually it's sold in 4x8 sheets. Some hardware stores have smaller sheets of it. But again, there are DIY solutions for that, but you'll have to solve some problems, and you'll have to decide if you can do that cheaper than just buying boards that are treated and prepped for your artwork. A creative artist that does like a DIY approach to their work might find a wide range of different surfaces in all kinds of non-art kind of places, such as raw wood. I have one of these that I was picked up in a craft store. This is just a round cut from a log and is suitable for making art onto. It's not acid free, as I've been warning you continuously. But you might consider metal, construction materials. There's a variety of different surfaces out that you might desire to make art onto. And again, this creates something that's unique and different from what everybody else is doing. Just keep in mind, you may want to consider its stability, the way your medium's going to interact with it, and how permanent the final piece would be. If you want to make art on them regardless, if you don't know how long it's going to last, then just be honest with your collectors. Tell them that you paint on this thing and it may be temporary, it may last a while. I don't know. Some artists like the temporal type work of working on these surfaces as the medium and the art will change over time. It's kind of a cool concept, but again, you need to make your collectors aware that you're doing that. One trick I learned from my wife Debbie when working with cradled panels is that you can cover these sides with painter's tape or masking tape to keep these edges clean, or you could paint these edges, decorate them or do other things, and then cover them with masking or painter's tape. And this will preserve these edges to be nice, so that when you do your final artwork, you can pull that off. You'll have a nice clean edge, and then you can sell them to your customers just that way, and they can hang them just like that, or they could then frame them into a traditional frame. So it's another option with panels. Some of the many benefits of working on panels, as I said before, they are rigid and they take a ton of abuse. They are flat and they are not going to flex when you paint them, draw on them, or do mixed media on them. Very rigid. They are also not going to flex or sag over time, which is a problem with some canvases and linen. So these are pretty stable. As I said earlier with boards, they're going to have to be shipped flat, and they can be heavier than other options. Matter of fact, they pretty much are the heavier of the options, unless you're going to go paint on metal. Other than the aluminum panels, those are pretty light. Some collectors may expect paintings to be done on canvas, but you can tell them that wood panels are the oldest known portable painting surface, going back to the 6th century BC in Egypt, Rome, and Greece. I actually prefer to paint on panels myself. I like the smooth surface out of the box. I like the rigidity and the feel of the brush on that. It creates a very precise line on these smooth, rigid surfaces. Yet, all around, the choice to make art on boards or panels opposed to paper or canvas is really going to be a personal preference, and you will need to figure out that by playing on these surfaces to determine if you like this better than working on other traditional surfaces. I personally find that I gravitate to different surfaces for different art pieces. One or the other just seems to be right for the project. One point that you might be wondering about at this point is going to be price. These panels are not going to be the cheapest options generally. For that, you'll have to look back to the paper options. Although, as we'll look into canvas in the next video, there are options in the board and panels that can be a cheaper option to some canvases, with many of the benefits of canvas. Although, as we will see, there are some affordable options on the canvas side too. Regardless, for the most part, these surfaces will be somewhat of a premium product, and you'll probably want to reserve them for final works. If you found this helpful, please consider giving us a like, and if you want to see more We Talk Art, consider subscribing. You'll get our videos in your channel when you open up YouTube. The next video in the series is going to be canvas, and I hope to have that out in about a month from when I post this video, which is kind of the middle end of June. So the next one will be sometime in the beginning part of July, hopefully. Have any questions? The comments section has been very active with many different artists, and there's a lot of opportunity to interact with them. I make an effort to read and respond to all the comments, so use the comment section. It's right down there. I will put 2 We Talk Art videos up on the screen here and here that you'll be able to click on. Otherwise, go make some art.
Thank you.